want to ask you a question. So, have you ever, and you don't have to put up your hand, but have you ever gone outside at night and looked up at the sky? Doesn't have to be late at night, just at night, looked up at the sky and tried to grasp the enormity of space, the expanse of what you are actually seeing when you look at the night sky. And, perhaps in doing that, I know I've done it many times, but perhaps in doing that you realise how small we really are. And I guess how small we are in comparison to the greatness of God and the greatness of creation. And when we think about David, I believe that's exactly what he was feeling in Psalm chapter 8 and verse 3. David said, "When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained." And the Hebrew phrase David's using here literally means when I look at your heavens. So he's saying, when I look at your heavens, Lord, when I consider them. And, when I was thinking about this and praying about this, I was always picturing David in the palace, on the rooftop, looking at the heavens. But I realised something really important when I was doing that. And you know what? Before David was a king, before he was in the palace, before all the battles, David was a simple shepherd. And so there would have been so many nights, night after night, where he was out in the fields. He would have been laying under the stars in the open sky with his sheep nearby, I guess. No walls, no city lights, no distractions, just silence and the stars. And so when David says, "When I consider thy heavens," I don't believe it was just a one-time event, a one-time moment. I think it was something he probably did over and over again. I can imagine him lying on the ground and, sheep nearby doing whatever sheep do at night, sleeping, I guess, and just looking up into that sky filled with countless stars. And it was then in those quiet moments, in those unseen moments, before anyone knew him, before anyone knew his name, God was shaping something in him. He looks up, he observes the night sky, and he lets the enormity of God's creation wash over him. Probably feeling very small in doing that, but at the same time recognising the greatness of God. Didn't have a telescope, there was no satellites, there was no modern astronomy like we've got today. And yet despite that, what he did see with the naked eye would have been magnificent. No light pollution, no city lights to dim the stars that we have now. I believe he would have seen the Milky Way galaxy like the initial picture just stretching across the sky. It would have been so brilliant and so amazing. And it's very much like that. You go anywhere out of city light, like distance from city lights. I know years ago when we went to Alice Springs to visit Pastor Brian's parents, and we went one night to the Tropic of Capricorn, which is about 30 kilometres north of Alice Springs. And, you go out there and it's just darkness, the outback. And the sky is brilliant. It's magnificent. You've never seen anything quite like it. It was so dark just out there, actually. We had a black car, and I remember Caleb running full belt towards the car. He didn't even see it and just smacked straight back into the car because he couldn't see it was that dark. And but the sky, it was just... That's all you could see, stars, brilliance, magnificence of God. And so here's David, and he's under the night sky, and he says, "When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained." And even without modern science, David grasped hold of a truth that we should also be humbled by. We are small, yet God notices us, and he knows us, each and every one of us. And yes, David's awe, it came from what he could see all those thousands of years ago. But today, we know far more about the universe than David ever did. Today, scientists estimate that there are over 100 billion galaxies in the observable universe. So what we can see, what they've been able to see. Each one of those galaxies contains billions, sometimes trillions of stars. We can't wrap our head around these figures. I know I can't. But to put the number 100 billion into perspective, if you started counting one galaxy every second, so 1, 2, 3, and so on, it would take you over 3,000 years just to count to 100 billion. Like mind-blowing figures. That's just the galaxies we're talking about. And yet the Bible never presents creation as something that's difficult for God. The very thing that leaves scientists speechless and without complete answers, God spoke into existence. He created it all. Every star, every galaxy, perfectly ordered, perfectly precise, beyond our comprehension. And yet he still notices you and he still notices me. And David's not the only one who was given a different perspective about creation, and that was, if we think about Job. So we know that Job went through one of the most difficult trials that's recorded in the Bible. He lost his possessions, he lost his health, he lost his family. And like many of us would do, I imagine, he asked why. He was asking God why, and he cried out, he questioned, he sat in silence. And when God finally answered him, God didn't explain the situation. He didn't have to explain himself. But he speaks to him throughout the 38th chapter of the book of Job. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Hast thou commanded the morning since thy days, and caused the day spring to know his place? Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? So when God responds to Job, he's not being mean, he's not being harsh, but he's changing his perspective. He's essentially saying, Job, you're asking me to explain your life, but you're standing inside a universe that you didn't create and you don't fully understand and you cannot control. When he says, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? What he's reminding Job of is, you weren't there at the beginning, but I was. When he asks him, can you command the morning? He's saying, you can't even make the sun rise, but I do every single day without fail. And when he talks about the stars, so Pleiades and Orion are constellations of stars, he's pointing to something great, and he's pointing to something beyond human ability. He's saying, you can't hold the stars in place, Job, but I hold the entire universe together effortlessly. You're worried about what you cannot control, but I am already holding things together that you cannot comprehend. So what was God really saying? Was he saying Job's pain didn't matter? Not at all. What he was saying was, there is more going on than you can see, and you can trust me with what you don't understand. God pointed Job to creation. In other words, just like David, look up. Because when you truly see who God is, you begin to realise something really powerful. And that is that if God can hold the universe together, he can hold your life together. If God can name every star, he hasn't forgotten your name. And even when you don't understand what he's doing, you can trust the one who created it all. So if we take a moment to really consider how vast creation is, and some of you may know these figures, but our galaxy that we live in, the Milky Way, stretches over 100,000 light years across. So what that means is if you were travelling at the speed of light, which is nearly 300,000 kilometres per second, it would take you 100,000 years to cross the Milky Way galaxy. And our nearest star, so it's called Proxima Centauri, the nearest star to Earth is 25 trillion miles away. And even travelling at the speed of light, so 300,000 kilometres per second, still take you nearly 4 years to reach it. But we can't even comprehend these distances. That's the closest star. Genesis 1:16 tells us, God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. Obviously, the greater light to rule the day is our sun. And that sun is created so large, you could fit 1 million Earths inside of it. 1 million of our Earths. I find it really fascinating, mind-blowing. But despite its enormous size, we're just the right distance from the sun. Because if we were any closer, we would burn. If we were any further away, we would freeze. We wouldn't be here, actually. It would be incompatible with life. But what I like at the end of verse 16 is it almost very casually says at the end, He made the stars also. It's just like, oh yeah, and he did that too. I find that quite an understatement, because when we consider the stars, so it is estimated by very smart scientists apparently, there may be more stars in the universe than grains of sand on Earth. And I would have thought there was a lot of grains of sand on the Earth. So the stars that scientists are still trying to count, God mentioned in 5 simple words. He made the stars also. So when you really consider it, when you stop to think about it, you realise the universe is vast and it's precise and beyond comprehension and understanding. Isaiah 40:26 tells us that he calls them by name. Every star is known by him. And here's where it becomes personal. So the same God who did all of that, he knows your name. And if that wasn't enough to show you how incredible our God is, yes, he created something vast and immeasurable in the heavens, but he also created something incredibly detailed in each and every one of us. Psalm 139:14 says, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. That same God who stretched out those galaxies, he designed you and he designed me with amazing detail and precision. You know, working in healthcare for many years, and studying the human body, I find it actually really incredible that we've got very smart people, very smart scientists and doctors who do the same, and they can't see that there is a creator behind the human body. It is so intricately designed, and everything must work in such unison together for good health, that my mind boggles why people can't see that. But each and every human is a miracle of creation. Your body has around 37 trillion cells, and every single one has a specific function. Like I said, they all work in unison. Your heart beats around 100,000 times a day, and you never even think about it. Unless you're having a palpitation or something, then you know. And your brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons, and they send signals faster than you can even imagine, probably greater than any computer system that man can come up with. And finally, your DNA, it's a fundamental part of what makes you, you. And it acts as a unique instruction manual for building your body. It determines your physical traits, it influences your biological function. And inside just one cell, just one of those cells, your DNA, your instruction manual, has enough information to fill hundreds of books. And yet it's all that information is packed into something so small, you can't even see it. You can only see it under a microscope. Incredible. And if David had understood what we know now, with all of the knowledge we have and with all of the things I shared with you, and the things are endless, you could go on, I believe he would have been so much more amazed. Didn't just create something big, created something intricate. He created you up close, intentional, and known. So when David says next in Psalm 8:4, what is man that thou art mindful of him? He wasn't just looking at the heavens, but he was looking at himself, marveling at a God who created such majesty, but who also cared for him. And here's what that means for us. With all of that vastness, with all of that majesty, great and small, God still sees you. Not just humanity as a whole, but you. He sees your struggles, he sees your thoughts, he sees your fears, all the tears you've cried, the prayers you haven't even spoken yet. He sees it all. When we change our perspective, it can change everything. When you see how truly big our God is, no, your problems won't just miraculously disappear, but your trust grows when you turn your eyes upon the Creator. And I believe we've all seen this pattern. I'm certainly guilty of it. We've come towards the end of a year, and we're tired and we're worn down. We're maybe a bit battered and bruised from the things we've gone throughout the year. And we say something like, I can't wait for this year to be over. I can't wait for 2026 or whatever it might be. I know I've done it. We pray, Lord, let next year be better. Let the new year bring peace, let the next season be easier. But obviously, the truth is that, as we all know, just because the calendar changes, life still happens. You could be going through the same trial you were going through last year. And New Year's will bring new challenges and new seasons will bring new trials. That's just life. But if we're not careful, we can find ourselves discouraged because the new year hasn't really changed anything, and we just continue to face the storms of life. That's what happens. And that's why we need to be like David and we need to look up. When life overwhelms you, when your enemies are surrounding you, and when the pressure is growing, look up. Shift your perspective from your circumstances to the God who controls the universe. And despite knowing all of this, knowing how great God is, we can still struggle to trust God in our everyday lives. Because even with his greatness in mind, sometimes we feel forgotten. David said in Psalm 13:1, "How long will thou forget me, O Lord? Forever? How long will thou hide thy face from me?" And I wonder if you've ever prayed something similar. Have you ever prayed and heard nothing? How long, Lord? How long until this changes? How long until I see relief? How long until this prayer is answered? That silence can be crushing, and it can be one of the hardest things to deal with. You pray, nothing seems to happen. You believe, nothing seems to change. But silence does not mean absence. God is still present, even when he's quiet. And we had Easter just last weekend, time to remember the death, the burial and the resurrection of Jesus. And I saw something online the other day which I found really interesting that I wanted to share. And to paraphrase, it said, there was a moment between the cross and the resurrection. A moment when Saturday was silent. Jesus had been crucified. The next day, heaven seemed still. Hope felt lost. Everything looked finished. But the silence was not the end. It was the space where God was preparing victory. And so what felt delayed wasn't a denial. The answer was being prepared. The resurrection was on the way. And I think sometimes in our lives, we live in that Saturday space where we can't see what's happening. God feels silent. We may have lost hope. We may not, we don't know what's going on. Nothing seems to be moving and nothing seems to be changing. But never mistake God's silence for absence. In the silence, remember that God is still working. Like we just sung, even when I don't see it, he's working. He's working something we can't see, but we must trust him. So in those times when God seems distant, look up and let his majesty remind you that he hasn't forgotten you. And we do have times where we stumble. We do have times we fall as we go through seasons and trials. And Psalm 94:18 reminds us, "When I said my foot slippeth, thy mercy, O Lord, held me up." His mercy holds us up. Don't be discouraged, because you know what? The enemy would love nothing more than for discouragement to be the end of our story, my story, your story. But Micah 7:8 declares, "Rejoice not against me, O mine enemy. When I fall, I shall arise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light unto me." Not if I fall. It says when I fall. So we fall, but you know what? We rise again. We get up again. Why do we rise? Why are we able to get back up? Because we serve a mighty God who is worthy at all times. And our strength is not in ourselves, it's in the Lord. Philippians 4:13 reminds us, "I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me." And so while life continues to bring its challenges, Lamentations 3:22 to 23 tells us, "It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness." Hallelujah. It's of the Lord's mercies. You know, you have never lived a day, not a single day, where God ran out of mercy. For me, up until today, I've lived roughly 17,000 days, give or take a few hundred here or there. But for me, for every single one of those days, I've never woken up to a morning where God said, "I'm out of mercy for you today." He already had new mercy waiting for me. Yesterday's mercy was enough for yesterday. Today's mercy is enough for today and its battles and whatever you come across. And tomorrow's mercy will already be waiting for you when you wake up. It's going to be there before you even wake up. Because great is his faithfulness. And if God has been faithful to you for every yesterday you've ever lived, you can trust him with today, and you can trust him with every tomorrow that you haven't seen yet. And yes, it's easy to have faith when miracles happen. It's great, you know. Miracles are happening, everyone's happy and things are going well. And faith will say, God can do it. I know he can do it. But trust will say, even if he doesn't do it my way, I'm going to follow him anyway. Yes. Faith will celebrate when the door's open, but trust will keep walking when the door is shut. Faith will shout in victory, but when you're in the valley, trust will say, I still believe. Faith believes in his power, but trust will surrender to his will. You know, David had faith in God's power, but he also trusted him in the unknown. It takes trust to stay and to stand when your prayers seem unanswered. But here's the question I guess we all need to ask ourselves in those moments of doubt, in those moments of wondering and questioning. Ask yourself, has he ever failed you before? Think back to a time that God delivered you when you couldn't see the solution. Remember the times he's brought you through. Remember the doors that he's opened. Remember the doors that he's closed. And you learnt later on it was for your good. It was for the best. Remember the prayers he's answered. Remember the strength he gave you when you couldn't go on. So again, if he's never failed you in the past, why would he start now? And if you're still waiting on an outcome or an answer to a prayer or a situation, doesn't mean he's failed. Doesn't mean he's left. It means you need to keep waiting. You need to keep trusting. Because, you know, I think we've all been there when it all gets too much. It can be very tempting to want to run away from it all. We can feel like David in Psalm 55 and 6. David said, "Oh, that I had wings like a dove, for then would I fly away and be at rest." You know, we might feel like David sometimes. Sometimes we don't want to fight. We're weary of the fight. The battle wears us down. And we all feel the temptation to escape from the storm. We're like, Lord, get me out of this. Lord, remove me from this storm. Lord, take me somewhere easier. But you know, as we grow, spiritual maturity isn't about running when things get hard. It's about standing firm. Yes. It's about refusing to let the enemy win, and it's about standing for God no matter what comes our way. David didn't run, he looked up. He reminded himself of the Creator who was above the storm, and so must we. David later declared in Psalm 61 and 2, "When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I." He didn't say lead me away, he said lead me to the rock. So when you're overwhelmed, when your heart is overwhelmed, when you don't know where to turn, and when you're tempted to run, ask the Lord to lead you to the rock. And if we think about the disciples when they were in the boat, in the storm, in the boat, we've heard a lot about these guys, or this story over the last few months. But if you picture it, they're in this boat. It's dark. The storm's all about them. The waves are crashing over the side of the boat. They were probably saturated from the water. The wind is howling. They were scared. You know, there would have been fear coming on them from all sides. They were feeling the effects of the storm. And then they glance over and there's Jesus in the boat with them. And it reminds me of, we went on a cruise about 18 months ago that went to the Pacific Islands. And so our rooms that we had all had balconies. And I remember sitting out on a few nights, sitting out on the balcony at night time. Or you could go up onto the deck as well of the ship. And you look out, there's no land in sight. There's no lights anywhere. It's just darkness in every direction. It's black water in every direction. For me, I found that very unsettling. It's a very unsettling feeling. And, you know, the ship had something on the TVs in the rooms that you could look up as a channel or whatever. And it showed you real time how deep the ocean was underneath you at any given time. And so sometimes it was kilometres deep. And I start like spiralling on things when I think about that, just imagining all of that underneath. And again, I found that really unsettling. And thankfully, we didn't go through any storms. We had pretty calm seas most of the time. But when I started to think about where I was and what that meant, you start to realise how small and how vulnerable you really are and how little control you actually have over the situation. But I'd do it again. Cruise was fun. But yeah, for me, I'm a terrible swimmer, okay? I have a phobia of deep water. When I was about 8 years old, someone pushed me into it was like a man-made lake where I couldn't touch the bottom and I nearly drowned. And, you know, so I can't be in water where I cannot touch the bottom. All right, so to be in a ship that's got kilometres of water underneath it and all around it is uncomfortable. And I remember thinking, if something went wrong, I wouldn't be able to save myself. What would I do? And it's in that moment that it hits you that you are completely dependent on the boat and the one who's steering the ship. And you trust him, whoever he is, you trust the captain to get you safely to the other side. And, you know, sometimes, like it was for us, the storm isn't even loud. It's just the unknown. It's the silence. It's the uncertainty. And you realise that the safest place is in the boat. Life's the same. Storms may rage around us. The safest place is always with Jesus. Don't step out of the boat, because you know what? The storm's outside of the boat as well. If you're in the boat and there's a storm, it's still outside of the boat. So stay in the boat. Don't step out. Step closer to him and watch him calm the waters. Because when the storms come, when the silence comes, don't abandon your faith. Don't abandon prayer. Don't abandon worship. Don't abandon fellowship. What would have happened if the disciples had jumped out of the ship, decided to bail out? They wouldn't have survived. And neither can we. We can't survive spiritually without the Lord. I just want to read you something I found powerful that Brother Lee Stoneking preached a while back. I'm just going to paraphrase a bit of what he said. But he said, every time you show up in the house of God, you defeat the enemy's plan. The devil tried to discourage you. He tried to distract you. He tried to keep you away, but you came anyway. When believers gather, faith grows, strength returns, the presence of God moves. Every time you walk through those doors, hell is reminded it failed. Because something happens when believers gather. Faith rises, strength returns, hope is restored, chains start loosening, the presence of God begins to move. Your worship hurts the enemy, your praise frustrates him, your faith proves he did not win. Every time you come to church, the devil is reminded he failed. So keep coming, keep worshipping, keep standing. Praise the Lord. What is it about worship? Worship shifts your perspective. Okay, when David considered the heavens, it changed how he saw everything. It reminded him that God was still worthy no matter what he was facing. And that leads to an important question for us. Are we followers or are we worshippers? And what's the difference? And if you think of it in like sporting terms, followers, like football teams, followers cheer when they're winning and it's great, life's easy. They celebrate when things are going well. They're loud in victory. But when the team starts losing, followers disappear. But worshippers are different. Worshippers stay faithful in every season. They praise in the drought. They sing in the storms. They don't serve God because of outcomes. They serve him because he's worthy. Worshippers are the ones who keep looking up even in the storm. While followers praise when things go well, worshippers praise no matter what. Worshippers are the ones that keep looking up even in the storm. They stay in every season. Our worship is not about how I feel. It's about who he is. And David's act of considering the heavens was worship. It shifted his perspective. His worship, it humbled him. He recognised God's greatness and he marvelled at his creation. And changing your perspective matters. We're in a battle. We're in a spiritual battle. And the things we go through are real. The pain is real. The pressure is real. But sometimes that battle is designed to distract us. Because if the enemy can't destroy you in one way, he'll try to distract you. If he can't take your salvation, he'll try to take your focus. So sometimes a spiritual battle isn't about the circumstances, it's about your eyes, it's about where you're looking, it's about your focus. When you're in a battle, are you looking at the storm? Or are you looking at the Creator above the storm? Because despite the storm, the Lord's there. Psalm 8:3 teaches us perspective. David looked up and he saw God's majesty. Look past the storm. Look past the chaos. And look at the Creator who numbered every star in the sky, who spoke the universe into existence, who created you with such detail and care, and who knows your name. And when you really do that, suddenly the storm isn't bigger than God. The distraction has now no power over you when your eyes are fixed on him. So when life feels heavy, look up. When your heart is overwhelmed, look up. And when you feel forgotten, look up. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Remember that as we move through life, new challenges will come, but so will new mercies every day. Storms will come, but Jesus is in the boat. You might fall, you will fall, but you'll get back up, you'll rise. And when we consider the heavens, when we remember who he is, when we recall what he has done, when we trust him even when we don't understand, we stand firm. The one who hung the moon, the one who placed the stars, the one who holds the universe together is the same God who's holding you. And he has never failed, and he is not going to start now. And remember Job, after all the questions, after all the pain, after all the silence, when Job finally encountered the greatness of God, he said in Job 42:5, I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now mine eye seeth thee. Everything changed, not because his situation was explained, but because his perspective changed. He saw God, and when you truly see God for who he is, high and lifted up, the creator of heaven and earth, it changes how you see everything else. So when life is overwhelming, when the storm is loud, and when the battle is heavy, look up. Consider the heavens and remember who God is, what he has done, and that he never fails. Sister Brown. So with everything we've seen and heard this morning, with everything considered, let me ask you, where are you looking? If you're here today and you've been feeling overwhelmed, if you're in a storm, you've been in a storm, if you feel like God has been silent, I just want to invite you to do something simple, and that is to look up. Just talk to him. You don't need perfect words. but take a moment and turn your eyes upon Jesus. If you're in a place where you don't understand what God is doing, but you know you need to trust him, you need to look up. Not because everything makes sense, but because he is still God. Let this be a moment where you say, God, I may not understand, but I trust you. If you've felt forgotten, if you've prayed and heard silence, if you've been asking, how long, Lord? I want you to know that he hasn't forgotten you. If that's you, you need to look up and let him remind you who he is. So as the musicians play this morning, just take this time to pray. Whatever situation you're in, you can come at the front and pray, we'll pray with you, or you can pray where you are. But reach out to the Lord, look up, look at him, look to the creator of everything. Realise that he is in control. We as human beings like to be in control. Sometimes there's many things that are out of our control. We need to trust him. Wherever you are, whatever's happening, the Lord knows.